Welcome, dreamers, to another journey through time's hidden corridors. I am your guide through the dreaming historian, where ancient mysteries whisper their secrets to those who dare to listen. Tonight, we voyage into the realm of the Antikythera mechanism, an enigma born from the sea's embrace, a relic so intricate, so impossibly advanced, that it defied every expectation of ancient technology. A device of gears and bronze, lost for millennia beneath waves that conceal more than water. This tale is one of timekeepers and stargazers, of sailors and scholars, where a sunken wreck cradled a mystery that forever blurred the line between ancient science and divine craftsmanship. Before we embark on this mystical journey, if these whispers from the past resonate with your soul, let your presence be known through a gentle like, and join our circle of dreamers by subscribing for more nightly journeys into history's hidden realms. Share with us, fellow dreamers, from which corner of the world you are joining tonight's contemplation. Let our global community of mystery seekers connect across time zones as we drift together into the past. Now, settle into comfort. Close your eyes, and let the ancient voices guide you into peaceful contemplation. The sea has always been a keeper of secrets. Beneath its ever-changing surface lies a realm untouched by the hands of time, where ancient wrecks rest in silence, and coral forests grow upon what was once the pride of empires. It was in such a watery grave, just off the rocky coast of the Greek island of Antikythera, that a secret long lost to the ages was discovered entirely by accident. The year was 1900, and a group of sponge divers, hardened by the salt and sun of the Aegean, steered their vessel toward familiar shores. These men were not seekers of history, nor students of the stars. They were simple islanders in search of sea sponges, the soft gold of the ocean. But fate, that ancient weaver of destinies, had other plans for them. One of the divers descended into the clear waters off the island's jagged cliffs. He was met, not with reefs or sponges, but with a surreal sight of vast shipwrecks scattered across the seafloor like bones in a forgotten graveyard. Statues of bronze lay twisted and broken. Amphorae rested half-buried in silt, and amidst this dreamlike wreckage was something no one expected. Clumped mass of bronze and wood, encrusted with centuries of silence. They brought fragments of it to the surface, unsure of what they had unearthed. At first glance, it was meaningless, just another corroded remnant of a Roman cargo ship lost to the sea. But as the sands of time shifted once more, this lump of forgotten metal would awaken. And when it did, it would rewrite everything we thought we knew about ancient minds. In the months that followed, Greek officials and archaeologists descended upon Antikythera, curious about the wreck and the treasures it might yield. Among the recovered statues and pottery, the strange bronze lump drew little attention. It was not beautiful, it was not majestic, it did not gleam. It seemed only like debris until it broke apart, revealing a hidden world within. Gears' teeth precision. Within the corroded fragments lay a complexity no one could explain. The device was unlike anything found from antiquity. Embedded within it were fine-toothed gears, interlocking with eerie precision, more akin to the workings of a pocket watch than to anything known from the ancient world. What was it doing in a Roman-era shipwreck? What hands had built such a marvel, only to have it sink into oblivion? For decades, the questions lingered. The pieces were shelved in the National Archaeological Museum in Athens, observed but not understood. Researchers peered into its decayed face, but the mechanism remained silent, its secrets tightly wound. As years became decades, the Antikythera mechanism began to draw the attention of those few who looked not only with eyes, but with wonder. It was in the 1950s that the first whispers of revelation began. British historian and physicist Derek de Sala Price took an interest in the strange object. He saw not merely rusted bronze, but intention, a mind, a method. With the help of Greek archaeologist Charalampos Karakalos and using the X-ray technology of the time, he peered through the decay and saw what had once been a complex arrangement of gears, inscriptions, and celestial alignments. Price famously declared that the mechanism was nothing less than an ancient computer, a tool for predicting the heavens, for charting the courses of stars and planets, for reading the rhythms of eclipses, lunar phases, and sacred festivals. But how could this be? The level of engineering surpassed anything else from the ancient world by over 1,000 years. As scientists and historians gathered around the fragments, they realized they were not simply peering into a machine, they were glimpsing into the soul of a lost genius. The shipwreck itself dated to the 1st century BCE. The artifacts on board, the statues, coins, and cargo pointed to a vibrant period of Roman and Greek trade. But the mechanism, it seemed older, or at least out of place, a technological anomaly that whispered of lost knowledge, hidden workshops, and master craftsmen whose names had been swallowed by the waves of time. The gears were hand-cut, arranged in a sophisticated system of rotation and coordination. Each gear tooth was crafted with such care that it rivaled precision machining from the industrial era. And yet, this was built centuries before such technologies were even dreamed of. It posed unsettling questions to the scholarly world. If the ancients were capable of such mechanical brilliance, what else had they achieved? What had been forgotten? Perhaps more chillingly, what had been deliberately forgotten? As investigations deepened, researchers discovered that the mechanism could model not only solar and lunar cycles, but the Saros-cycler complex 80-year pattern used to predict eclipses. It could even account for the irregular orbit of the moon, a detail not commonly modeled until the 20th century. Inscriptions etched into the device hinted at its use as an astronomical guide. Ancient Greek text, barely visible, named months, constellations, and festivals tied to celestial events. It was not just a scientific instrument. It was a sacred one. The Antikythera mechanism was not merely a tool of astronomy. It was a bridge between science and spirituality, between knowledge and reverence, between man and cosmos, and it had been lying in the darkness of the sea, patiently waiting for its story to be told. The ship that carried it remains a mystery. Was it bound for a philosopher's library, a temple of learning, or perhaps the private chamber of a priest astronomer who had commissioned such a marvel, who had dared to dream of mapping the universe with gears and wheels? The wreck bore no definitive answers, only more fragments, but it had opened a door, one that scholars could no longer close. With each gear uncovered, each symbol deciphered, the mechanism challenged the narrative of progress. It suggested that humanity had once touched a brilliance we had forgotten, that the ancients, in their marble temples and starlit observatories, had gazed into the universe not only with awe but with understanding. And so, the corroded bronze relic became more than a machine. It became a mystery, a riddle carved in metal and drowned in silence, a reminder that the past is not always as distant as we imagine. Sometimes, it breathes just beneath the surface. As the sun sets over the waters of Antikythera, casting gold across the waves, one cannot help but wonder, what other miracles lie beneath, unseen? What other ancient minds dared to dream of capturing time? In the chapters to come, we shall journey deeper into the workings of this sacred machine, explore the minds who might have built it, and contemplate the cosmic dance it sought to predict. But for now, let your breath slow with the rhythm of the waves, and imagine the ship beneath the sea, its planks worn, its sails long gone, but its soul still whispering through gears and shadows. Drift gently, for the sea keeps many secrets, and one of them has just begun to speak. In the stillness of a starlit night, far from the pulse of modern cities, the heavens unfold in silent grandeur. The ancients knew this silence well. They lived by it, measured their lives by it, and somewhere in that ancient rhythm, they found a way to translate the sky into metal and motion. The Antikythera mechanism was no idle artifact. It was a symphony of turning wheels, each gear an echo of a celestial body, each movement a mimicry of the divine dance above. As we peer into the heart of this lost machine, we step not only into the workshop of a forgotten genius but into the very gears of the cosmos. The mechanism's face, though now fragmented and worn, once displayed the sky's rhythms in concentric circles. On one side, a dial marked the passage of the solar year. On the other, spiraling arms traced the path of eclipses through time. Around its many gear wheels were inscriptions and markers, signs of zodiacs, phases of the moon, and perhaps even planetary alignments. But how did it work, and why was it so precise? To understand the marvel of the mechanism is to understand the soul of ancient astronomy. The Greeks of the classical and Hellenistic periods were not mere poets and philosophers. They were observers of the stars, mathematicians of the heavens. Long before telescopes, they charted the motion of celestial bodies with nothing but the naked eye and relentless curiosity. They had noticed that the moon waxed and waned in a pattern, that eclipses returned after a certain span, that the wandering stars, what we now call planets, moved, not in simple circles but in complex loops. From this wealth of observation, they sought to build models, and some, it seems, sought to build machines. The Antikythera mechanism used a differential gear system, a type of gear that would not be reinvented until the 16th century. It included more than 30 precisely cut bronze gears, each calculated to transfer rotational movement at ratios that mirrored the cycles of the heavens. The central gear, linked to a hand crank, would simulate the passage of days. As it turned, the other gears engaged in a cascade of motion, triggering displays for lunar cycles, eclipses, and perhaps even planetary positions. And yet, this was no mere toy. Each gear tooth had been cut by hand. There were no factories, only artisan tools, steady hands, and minds that understood both the sky and the wheel. It was as if the stars themselves had whispered their patterns into bronze. One of the most remarkable features of the mechanism was its accounting for the moon's elliptical orbit. Unlike a perfect circle, the moon's speed varies slightly over the course of its cycle. To mimic this variation, the mechanism used an ingenious pine slot device, an offset arrangement that allowed for faster and slower movement at different points in the cycle. That one innovation alone speaks to a level of scientific sophistication far beyond what we believed the ancients to possess. But this wasn't merely science, it was harmony, a philosophy rendered mechanical, a belief that the universe moved according to noble, divine laws and that human hands could reflect that order. Many scholars believe the mechanism may have been used in teaching, a portable model of the cosmos, a guide to the stars, a sacred object that turned observation into understanding. It could have served a philosopher, an astrologer, a ship captain plotting voyages by the heavens, or even a priest, keeping time for sacred rituals aligned with the sky. One dial tracked the Metonic cycle, a 19-year span after which the phases of the moon repeat on the same days of the year. Another marked the Saros cycle, a span of 223 lunar months that predicts solar and lunar eclipses. How did they know? What lost scrolls? What ancient minds had mapped these patterns? We know that Babylonian astronomers had tracked lunar and solar cycles with remarkable accuracy centuries before. But to render that knowledge into metal, to build a gear-driven model that embodied not only mathematics but motion, that was something else entirely. This was not just knowledge preserved, it was knowledge animated. It is no wonder that when modern scientists began scanning the fragments with three-dimensional X-ray tomography and imaging, they were stunned. Gear trains revealed layer after layer of function, each piece interlocking with profound purpose. Even today, over a century after its discovery, and yet so much remains missing. It is believed that the original mechanism was housed in a wooden box, about the size of a shoebox. The box would have had doors that opened to reveal the dials and displays. Inscriptions along the sides explained the functions in tiny, meticulous Greek letters. Much of that has gone lost to the sea, worn by centuries of silence, but the parts that remain sang with complexity. One reconstructed dial showed a calendar of Greek games, including the Olympics. This meant the mechanism did not merely track the heavens, it linked them to earthly life, to ritual, to competition, to memory. Time, in this machine, was not abstract. It was lived in one of its makers. Some suggest the mechanism may have originated from the island of Rhodes, where a tradition of astronomical craftsmanship once flourished. There, the great astronomer Hipparchus is thought to have lived. He discovered the precession of the eclipses. He charted thousands of stars. He may well have laid the mathematical foundations for such a device. Others look to Archimedes, that great mind of Syracuse, who is said to have created a planetarium that could model celestial movements. Though his devices were lost, whispers of their brilliance remained in Roman accounts. Could the Antikythera mechanism be a descendant of that legacy? Or was it a singular marvel, a lone spark of genius that flared and vanished? What we do know is that nothing like it has ever been found again. No second mechanism, no ancient manuals, no workshop filled with gears, just this one silent, alone, and broken, as if it were meant to vanish, as if history could not carry its weight. And yet, its voice endures. Through corrosion and decay, it speaks. It tells us that the ancients were not merely gazers at the sky, but engineers of its rhythm, that in their temples and libraries, on their islands and ships, they sought to bring heaven to earth not in myth alone, but in mechanism. And in this voice, something sacred stirs. As we move deeper into the chapters ahead, we shall explore the inscriptions left behind, the mystery of its creators, and the echoes of this lost knowledge through time. But for now, rest your thoughts beside the gears. Let the soft ticking of imagined wheels guide your breath. The stars still turn, and once, long ago so did bronze. In the silence of centuries, some voices fade into nothingness, but others linger etched not in air or parchment, but in bronze, whispering across time through lines, curves, and careful engraving. The Antikythera mechanism, ancient as it is, was not only a marvel of motion. It was also a book, a guide, a sacred record written in the meticulous hand of a forgotten scribe. Though time has corroded its surface, beneath the scars of the sea, the machine still murmurs in letters shaped by human hands. For decades, the inscriptions on the mechanism's fragments were little more than faint ghost flickers of ancient Greek text, partially obscured by corrosion, minerals, and the passage of 2,000 years. And yet, with the advent of advanced imaging technology, three-dimensional X-ray tomography, and polynomial texture mapping, these barely perceptible scratches began to glow again, like constellations reappearing in a darkening sky. More than 3,000 characters have now been deciphered, scattered across the fractured surfaces like prayers lost in a temple collapse. These are not ornamental, they are deeply intentional. Words placed for clarity, for instruction, perhaps even for reverence. What do they say? They speak of cycles, of time, of gods and stars. The text carved into the Antikythera mechanism can be divided into two main types, or ancient calendars linked to astronomical phenomena, and user instructions, almost like a manual, guiding the hand that turned the crank. On one fragment, the name of the month Artemisios appears, a reference to the lunar calendar used in the Greek world. Another speaks of eclipses marked by symbolic descriptions, obscuration in the east, reddish light, darkening of the moon. These were not cold technical notes, but poetic descriptions of cosmic events, moments when the sky itself seemed to speak. The mechanism recorded not just when eclipses would happen, but how they would appear. It gave the direction, duration, and even the color, like an ancient weather report for the heavens. One section described the Saros cycle with such precision that it stunned modern astronomers. It broke the 18-year cycle into monthly phases, predicting with surprising accuracy the return of solar and lunar eclipses. To encode such knowledge in gear ratios and annotated spirals required not only observation but deep understanding and inheritance of Babylonian, Egyptian, and Greek traditions brought into one unified vision. This was not guesswork. It was astronomy rendered in script and mechanism. It was wisdom inscribed, and the writing was not grand or poetic in form. It was functional, compact, and engraved in minuscule letters some less than 2 millimeters high. Whoever carved them worked with a steady hand and a clear purpose. This was not for public display. It was meant for those who were already understood, those who sought meaning in the stars and found comfort in their repetition. The script itself belongs to Koine Greek, the common tongue of the Hellenistic world, but embedded within it are echoes of older knowledge terms and names passed down from Babylonians, from Egyptian priests who studied Sirius, from travelers who followed the stars across desert and sea. Some of the text appears to list city names and dates of major Panhellenic games, the Olympic Games, the Nemean Games, the Pythian Games. These, too, were tied to celestial rhythms. The mechanism did not separate the sky from the earth, or the divine from the mundane. It wove them together, as the ancients always had. One particularly haunting fragment seems to describe the paths of planets. Though much of it is lost, the surviving words hint at a more complex model than previously imagined. Some researchers now believe that the Antikythera mechanism may have included indicators for the 5 visible planets Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn. If true, this would place it far ahead of its time, capable of modeling planetary motion using episodes, which mimicked the strange retrograde loops the planets seem to perform in the sky. This is knowledge that would not reappear until the work of Islamic astronomers and later Copernican models centuries afterward. What happened to the rest of the inscription? What other pages were lost when the device shattered? The original device is thought to have had multiple bronze plates, now mostly missing. Scholars estimate that up to 15,000 characters may have once adorned its surfaces, hidden behind doors or along the sides of its wooden housing. Some of these might have contained astronomical tables, references to past eclipses, perhaps even names those of its maker, its patron, or the temple where it once belonged. In a way, the missing text is the most tantalizing. What truths were recorded that we will never read? What mysteries remain sealed, not by time, but by the quiet sinking of knowledge into the sea? And then there is the most mystical idea of all. What if these inscriptions were meant for something more than practical instruction? Some researchers have noted the ceremonial tone of the writing, its reference to brightness and color, its inclusion of games and months tied to specific deities, suggests a ritual dimension. This was not a purely scientific object. It was spiritual. To those who had turned its crank and watched its dials align with the heavens, it must have felt like magic. The Antikythera mechanism did not merely explain the sky. It made the user part of it, a participant in the celestial dance. Each revolution of the gears mirrored the revolutions of the spheres above. Each reading of the dials brought man and cosmos into alignment. This is where the ancient mindset diverges from ours. We see the sky as distant. They saw it as home. We use machines to calculate. They used machines to contemplate. And in those faint letters, barely legible under modern lights, the ancients left us a trail of breadcrumbs back to their world, a world where knowledge was sacred, and time was not a line, but a circle of return. As we prepare to step beyond these inscriptions into the question of who might have created such a wonder, take a moment to listen, not with the ears, but with imagination. Listen to the hands that carved letters smaller than seeds into bronze, hands that worked by oil lamp, guided by stars, in a silence deeper than ours. They are still there. If you are still waiting, in the heart of every great mystery lies an invisible hand. Though we gaze upon the Antikythera mechanism with wonder, its gears worn and greened by time, we are left to imagine the hand that forged it, the mind that saw the stars not as unreachable fires, but as patterns to be understood, mechanisms to be mirrored in bronze and wood. The question that haunts the mechanism more than any other is not just how it works, but who could have made it? Who was the dreamer who turned the cosmos into a machine? The ancient world, vast and fractured, rarely preserved the names of its true inventors. Credit was often lost, erased by conquest or the humility of oral tradition. But among the few luminous minds of the Hellenistic age, several figures shimmer faintly on the edge of possibility. Some scholars point to Archimedes of Syracuse, the legendary engineer, an inventor who lived in the 3rd century BCE. His machines wore engine, water screws, and geometric devices were the stuff of myth and science alike. Ancient sources claim that Archimedes crafted a device that could model the motion of the heavens, a kind of early planetarium. Could this be the ancestor of the Antikythera mechanism? Though no known device survives from Archimedes' hand, the spirit of his genius lingers in the Antikythera fragments. Precision, complexity, harmony. Each gear feels as though it was touched by someone who understood not only how the heavens moved, but how to mirror that divine movement in metal. Then there is Hipparchus of Nicaea, a more likely candidate, and one whose shadow looms large in the constellation of Greek astronomy. Living around 190 to 120 BCE, Hipparchus mapped over 800 stars and discovered the precession of the equinoxes on insights so profound it would not be measured again with equal accuracy until modern times. It is now believed that one of the lunar models used in the Antikythera mechanism directly reflects calculations only Hipparchus is known to have made, a mathematical model of the moon's variable motion, incorporating elliptical orbits and apogees, mimics Hipparchus's surviving theories so closely that the match can hardly be coincidence. But there is no signature, no engraving on the bronze that reads, "Made by him." And perhaps that, too, is by design. The world from which the mechanism emerged was one of secret knowledge. Workshops of bronze workers, mathematicians, and astronomer-philosophers often passed ideas not through books, but through apprenticeships, through the sacred hush of student to master, in courtyards under the stars. Imagine such a workshop, a stone chamber in Rhodes, where gears are filed by lamplight, where scrolls filled with calculations are stacked beside wooden models, and where the air smells of oil, sweat, and salt. At the center stands a man, not a statesman, not a soldier, but a thinker. He stares into the darkened sky and sees wheels, circles, and ratios. This man may never be named, but his soul still speaks through the Antikythera mechanism. And there may not have been only one. To craft something so intricate required not just a singular vision but collaboration, a network of minds, metal workers with skilled hands, astronomers fluent in Babylonian cycles, scribes who etched instructions with exquisite care, philosophers who debated whether the universe moved in perfect harmony or divine disorder. Together, perhaps, they created this mechanism. Together, perhaps, they tried to capture the motion of time. It is even possible that the Antikythera mechanism was one of several part of a broader tradition of Hellenistic computing devices that were lost in the fires of history. The great libraries of Alexandria and Pergamon once held knowledge that rivaled anything the world has since seen. Could the blueprints of the mechanism have been shelved there, only to vanish in flames? Or perhaps the makers of the Antikythera mechanism never intended their secrets to spread. In an age where knowledge was often sacred, even dangerous, such a device might have been reserved for the initiate priests, scholars, or elite navigators entrusted with understanding the divine clockwork. We may never know. And yet the mystery itself is beautiful. It is the silence between the gears, the absence that speaks. In not knowing the maker, we are invited to imagine every possibility. A lone genius, a secret brotherhood, a forgotten school of mechanical astronomy lost to time. Even the mechanism's journey to the sea remains wrapped in shadow. The ship that carried it was large, well-built, filled with bronze statues and fine goods. Was it a vessel returning from Asia Minor to Rome? A merchant ship bringing plundered art and treasures to a noble patron? Or was it something more esoteric, a philosophical art carrying sacred tools of knowledge? The Antikythera mechanism was found in the company of greatness, statues of gods, fine pottery, coins of value. It was precious, it was meant to travel, it was not a trinket cast aside, but a treasure worthy of transport. Its creator, whoever they were, had likely seen the stars reflected in calm waters, had felt the night air as they turned to the device in their hands, watching wheels spin in imitation of the cosmos. They knew what they had built, and they knew it was more than a machine. It was a mirror, not of the self, but of the universe. In the chapters ahead, we shall follow the trail of this knowledge through Alexandria's vanished halls, through Roman silence, and into the unexpected rebirth of celestial machines in the Renaissance. But as we rest tonight in this moment, let us offer a silent tribute to the mind behind the mechanism, to the hands that cut each gear, to the dreams they must have had as they worked by flickering flame. Though history forgot their name, the stars remember. And now, so do we. There are places in history that feel more myth than memory. Alexandria was one such place, a city of marble and light, where scrolls whispered in 1,000 tongues, and the sea lapped gently at the footsteps of philosophers. It was here, in this fabled sanctuary of learning, that the wisdom of the ancient world converged, a confluence of Egyptian magic, Greek reason, Babylonian calculation, and Persians. And though the Antikythera mechanism was pulled from a sunken ship far from the city's harbor, its very soul seems to echo the rhythms of Alexandria. To understand the mystery of the Antikythera device is to journey back into the dreaming corridors of the Library of Alexandria, a beacon that once stood as the brightest flame of human inquiry. The library was more than a repository. It was an ark of memory, built in the early 3rd century BCE under the rule of Ptolemy I and his successors. It aspired to gather all knowledge under one roof, every scroll, every voice, every secret. From mathematics to medicine, astronomy to alchemy, its holdings numbered in the hundreds of thousands. Within those vaulted halls, scholars sought to measure the world. They mapped the Nile, they dissected the human body, they charted the stars, and most importantly they shared. Here Greek philosophers studied under Egyptian priests, Indian numerals mingled with Phoenician alphabets. Babylonian star tables were copied, translated, and expounded upon. The cosmos, once divided by empire and language, began to come together in a single, unified model. Among these seekers were the names that danced through the fog of history. There was Eratosthenes, who measured the Earth's circumference with astonishing accuracy using only shadows and geometry. There was Aristarchus, who dared to suggest that the Earth orbited the sun, an idea too radical to survive his age. And there was whose celestial calculations may have flowed from the library's scrolls into the very gears of the Antikythera mechanism. Though we cannot say with certainty that the mechanism was born in Alexandria, it bears the unmistakable fingerprint of its intellectual legacy. The very idea of modeling the heavens with rotating dials, of embedding knowledge and motion, would have flourished in a city where thinkers were encouraged to build, debate, and dream. The mechanism speaks the language of Alexandria not just in Greek characters, but in its synthesis of ideas. Its gears echo the Babylonian obsession with cycles. Its inscriptions murmur of Egyptian calendars and sacred alignments. Its mechanical logic recalls the Euclidean precision of Greek geometry. All these streams met in Alexandria, and from Alexandria, they flowed outward into workshops, temples, and voyages across the Mediterranean. One such voyage may have carried the Antikythera mechanism into the hands of a Roman noble, a philosopher priest, or a collector of wonders, bound for Italy by sea. It is no accident that the shipwreck where the mechanism was found also contained statues of mythic figures, coins from multiple regions, and luxury items destined for the elite. The mechanism was not a farmer's tool. It was a treasure of the learned world. But Alexandria's story is not one of eternal light. The fires came, not once but many times. Wars, riots, the slow decay of empire. The great library was burned, raided, and forgotten across centuries. Each loss like a curtain falling upon the stage of human memory. By the time Rome collapsed and the world entered its long twilight, most of Alexandria's scrolls had vanished. Their knowledge, once flowing like the Nile, dried into dust. Perhaps this is why the Antikythera mechanism feels like a relic from a dream. It is a survivor, a voice that slipped beneath the waves before the flames could reach it. The mechanism carries within it not just gears and numbers, but echoes of scribes copying star charts by lamplight, of mathematicians aligning disks to represent lunar phases, of teachers using bronze dials to explain the cycles of eclipses to curious pupils seated on stone benches. In that sense, it is Alexandria's ghost, a fragment of its flame. The Hellenistic age, so rich with inquiry, faded slowly. Alexandria gave way to Constantinople. Greek science gave way to Roman pragmatism, and the delicate art of celestial mechanics slipped into the shadows. Devices like the Antikythera mechanism were no longer made. The skill was forgotten. The chain of knowledge was broken, but not entirely. For as long as one fragment survived, corroded, mysterious, unreadable, Alexandria's whisper remained, and that whisper would wait, patient, deep beneath the sea, waiting for divers to stumble upon its resting place, waiting for eyes that could see beyond rust, waiting for minds that would remember how to listen. As we leave Alexandria behind and step further into the mechanism's mystery, we turn our gaze now toward its inner workings. What secrets lie in the mathematical precision of its How could such knowledge have been preserved, encoded, and forgotten in a single object? In the next chapter we shall enter the labyrinth of ratios and rotations. We shall see how time, when placed in the hands of dreamers, can be measured not just in days, but in the turning of wheels. And as we go, let the wind that once stirred papyrus scrolls in Alexandria stir your thoughts. Let the dust of forgotten shelves settle gently in your breath. The library may be gone, but its dreams remain. Time of the ancients was not a straight line, it was a wheel. They saw the sky turn nightly above them, stars returning in patterns as regular as breath. The sun rose not by chance but by design. The moon waxed and waned as if guided by unseen hands. In every movement of the heavens, there was rhythm, and where there is rhythm, there is ratio. To look into the Antikythera mechanism is to gaze into that rhythm, to see time transformed into motion and harmony. Behind its weathered faceplate and corroded hands lies a network of gears so intricate, so deliberate, that it becomes clear. This was not only a device, it was an embodiment of time itself. Let us now enter the mechanism's sacred interior. The central shaft, when turned by a hand crank, activated a cascade of bronze gears, some tiny, others large, all meshed with precise ratios. It was, in its day, the most advanced analog computer the world had ever seen. But what did it calculate? At the heart of its function was the desire to predict celestial phenomena, planetary alignments, all encoded in mechanical relationships, ratios crafted with an almost divine sensitivity to the cosmos. The main gear train operated on a base 365.25-day cycle, the solar year as observed by the Greeks. From this base, the mechanism employed a network of reductions and multiplications to produce outputs aligned with the lunar month, the Metonic cycle, and the Saros eclipse cycle. One of its most haunting ratios was that of 223 to 19. This corresponds to the Saros cycle, the ancient period of approximately 18 years and 11 days, after which lunar and solar eclipses repeat. To encode such a span into gears required deep understanding not only of astronomical observation, but of arithmetic harmony. The creators of the mechanism knew that by dividing time into interlocking periods, they could predict the not by magic but by mathematics. Another essential ratio embedded in the machine, 254:19, representing the number of synodic lunar months in a Saros cycle. This allowed the mechanism to show when eclipses would occur, how long they would last, and even whether they would be visible from the eastern or western horizon. And it didn't stop there. To replicate the moon's irregular speed through the sky, the mechanism used what is now called an epicyclic gearing system, gears rotating on other gears, like moons orbiting planets. A pin and slot device cleverly varied the speed of rotation, mimicking the actual motion of the moon as observed from Earth. This was no simple feat. It required a geometric mind, a poetic mind, a mind that saw the sky not just as a canvas, but as a code. Each gear in the mechanism was a fragment of this code. Some had 127 teeths, others 32. The ratios were not random but carefully selected to reflect astronomical constants, numbers that governed not just one lifetime, but centuries of celestial motion. And the gear teeth themselves tell a story. Cut by hand, filed to tight tolerances, they suggest a workshop not only of artistry, but of discipline. The spacing between teeth, the uniform depth, the tiny pivots and rods, these were crafted with care, not mass-produced. The mechanism was not built to impress with grandeur, but to function with grace. Many of its gears are now lost. Historians and engineers have spent years reconstructing what may have once existed, guessing at the missing parts like archaeologists of harmony. Using modern tools like CT scanning and 3D modeling, they have rebuilt digital versions of the mechanism, watching the gears turn in virtual space, aligning moons and eclipses across millennia. One researcher likened the process to resurrecting the logic of a forgotten mind. Indeed, it feels that way. For when you watch a replica of the Antikythera mechanism in motion, something stirs. The dials rotate, pointers sweep across engraved calendars, the moon appears in quarter half and full syncing with solar paths and zodiac signs. It is not unlike watching a celestial ballet, directed by bronze. The precision of the ratios also reveals something deeper, an intimacy with time. The makers of this device did not seek to conquer time, as we often do. They sought to understand it, to participate in it, to mark its passages not as burdens, but as patterns of return. They did not count days, they counted cycles. They felt the pulse of time, not in hours, but in returns, the return of a festival, a season, a shadow cast by the moon. This rhythm governed ancient life. Crops were planted according to lunar signs. Sacred games were held when the stars aligned. Offerings were made when eclipses loomed, seen as omens from above. And through all of this, the Antikythera mechanism stood as a bridge between the cold mechanics of gear and the warm breath of belief. In encoding the sky, they had encoded themselves. And what of the calendar dial? One of the most remarkable components was a spiral dial, coiling like a serpent, marked with months and eclipses. As the central gear turned, a pointer would follow the spiral, sweeping across dates as eclipses came and went. It was not only informative, it was beautiful. Another dial tracked the Metonic Sakala 19-year period after which the lunar and solar calendars align. To modern eyes, this seems esoteric, but to the ancients, it meant everything. It was the rhythm of harmony, of divine order. The more we study these ratios, the more we feel their pulse not as math alone, but as meditation. The Antikythera mechanism is, in a way, a prayer rendered in engineering. A prayer that says, time is knowable, that beneath the changing sky lies pattern, that chaos, if understood deeply enough, becomes music. As we leave this chapter of gears and ratios, let us take with us that music. Let it echo softly in our breath. Let it guide us gently into sleep. The ancients, in their turning wheels, sought peace through knowledge. And now so do we. There are moments in history that feel as if the world holds its breath, moments when something precious slips away, not with fanfare or fire, but in silence. So it was with the Antikythera mechanism. Long before it became an artifact studied by scholars and scanned by machines, it was simply an object in motion, a tool of wonder that passed from hand to hand, turned by curious fingers and reverent minds. And then, one day it vanished beneath the sea. The shipwreck that entombed the mechanism rests near the island of Antikythera, a jagged outcrop that rises from the Aegean like a sentinel of forgotten things. The water there is deep, deceptively clear, with sharp rocks below and fierce winds above. Ancient sailors knew to be wary of it. Yet one Roman era ship, perhaps too heavily laden, perhaps caught in a sudden storm, found its end there. It would have been a grand vessel, likely built in the eastern Mediterranean, strong enough to carry statues, coins, fine glassware, and precious goods, all markers of elite trade and cultural exchange. Among its cargo was something rare, the Antikythera mechanism, packed not with gold, but with knowledge. As the ship sank, The mechanism was pulled into darkness. Wood splintered, crates shattered. Objects that once adorned palaces and temples spilled into the depths like offerings to Poseidon. And the mechanism, perhaps still in its wooden case, perhaps wrapped in cloth, came to rest among the coral and sand. Its gears halted for the first time in decades, maybe centuries. The sea does not rush. It takes its time. Slowly, over generations, salt crystallized in crevices. Barnacles clung to bronze. Microbes chewed at wood until nothing remained. The mechanism, which once turned with such delicate grace, became a crusted mass of green corrosion. It would sleep for 2,000 years. No eye would see it. No hand would turn it. The knowledge it carried of eclipses, of cycles, of celestial harmonies would fade from memory, until even the idea that such a device could exist seemed unthinkable. Historians would later speak of the technological gulf, the thousand-year chasm between the Antikythera mechanism and the mechanical clocks of the Middle Ages. How could such a brilliant invention simply appear and then disappear? The answer lies not in invention alone, but in fragility. The ancient world was connected not just by roads and empire, but by minds that spoke to one another across languages and philosophies, that shared scrolls, debated in courtyards, and built mechanisms to understand the cosmos. But minds are mortal, libraries burn, wars break, temples fall, and when they do, ideas vanish, not because they were wrong, but because they were forgotten. The Antikythera mechanism's descent was not just a physical sinking, it was a metaphor. The loss of the mechanism marked a turning point, a moment when humanity's grasp of complex, mechanical understanding dimmed, and yet it also became a seed, for deep below the waves, undisturbed by war or time, the mechanism waited. In 1900, when sponge divers from the Greek island of Simi stumbled upon the wreck, they were not looking for history, they were looking for sustenance, for sponge beds to harvest. One diver descended into the clear waters and returned not with but with a story of statues, of marble arms, of a forest of broken things on the ocean floor. The Greek government dispatched archaeologists. Statues were recovered, vases, coins, and then an unassuming lump of bronze, encrusted and fused. It was set aside, catalogued, forgotten again, until it broke open. And inside were teeth, gears, wheels within wheels, time itself, encoded in bronze. The moment was small. No headlines, no astonishment, just quiet curiosity. But it was the beginning of resurrection. Over the next century, scholars, engineers, and dreamers would peer into the mechanism's remains. They would scan it, map it, rebuild it, piece by piece. The sea's silence would be undone. But as we stand now, between the moment of the ship's sinking and the modern rediscovery, we must pause. We must honor the silence. For those lost years are not absence, they are transformation. Underwater, the mechanism did not die. It waited, and in waiting, it was preserved. Like the seed of an ancient tree buried in volcanic ash, it endured. When finally awakened, it would bloom not in the soil of the past, but in the minds of the present. And yet, what else lies below? What other shipwrecks cradle mechanisms that have never turned? What dreams of Alexandria still rest beneath silt and coral? Too deep for divers, too fragile for machines. The Antikythera wreck is still being explored. Even in recent years, more fragments have been recovered. Fingers of bronze, slivers of gears. The story, it seems, is still unfolding. And so we remember, history is not static. It is a tide. It recedes. It reveals. As we leave this chapter, let your breath move like water, slow, deep, inevitable. Let your thoughts drift with the currents. Beneath the sea, in darkness and in patience, time once slept. Now it dreams again. The Antikythera mechanism vanished from memory for nearly 2 millennia, but the dream it embodied, the vision of a clockwork cosmos, did not entirely die. It flickered like a lamp hidden behind thick curtains, waiting for the fabric of history to shift. And it was in the long dawn of the Renaissance, in cloisters and workshops far removed from the shipwreck's salty tomb, that a familiar glimmer began to return. The Renaissance was a rebirth of light, but not a new light. It was the rekindling of ancient fires. Scholars in 15th century Florence and Venice pored over fragile scrolls, translating the works of Plato, Ptolemy, and Euclid. Arabic manuscripts were studied and copied, preserving the astronomical knowledge passed down through Islamic Golden Age scholars, who themselves had inherited Babylonian, Indian, and Greek traditions. In this great lineage of learning, something strange began to happen. The heavens once more became machines. Armillary spheres appeared, metal orbs composed of rings representing celestial circles. These were tools not only for education, but for reverence. They echoed the mechanism's mission, to embody the sky and form in motion. Astrolabes were crafted with astounding elegance, flat brass, instruments that could calculate the altitude of stars and planets, used by scholars, navigators, and mystics alike. Though less complex than the Antikythera mechanism, they shared its spirit. Time made tangible. And most striking of all were the Ori's mechanical models of the solar system that used gears and rotating arms to demonstrate planetary motion. Many of these emerged only in the 17th and 18th centuries, long after the Renaissance's golden peak, but their roots stretched far deeper. They were, unknowingly, echoes of something lost. Whispers in bronze, dreams forged into metal by hands that had never seen the Antikythera mechanism. Yet somehow was it possible that remnants of this ancient technology had survived in secret? Some believe that fragments of scrolls or blueprints, carried across the sea, may have found refuge in the libraries of Constantinople, later flowing into Italy with the fall of the Byzantine Empire. Others suggest oral tradition, passed down in workshops where apprentices copied the techniques of masters without knowing the origins of their craft. But no one could recreate the mechanism itself. Its complexity remained unmatched. The Renaissance, brilliant though it was, still lacked a model as compact, as deeply integrated, as profoundly mysterious as the Antikythera mechanism. The sky returned, but not the symmetry. Something essential had been forgotten, and yet the yearning remained. Leonardo da Vinci, with his obsessive drawings of mechanical devices, seems like a mind that would have adored the Antikythera mechanism. His notebooks are filled with gears, pulleys, planetary diagrams, and anatomical sketches that reflect the same drive to make the hidden visible, to draw the divine into form. Leonardo never saw the mechanism, but had he lived in an age where it had been known, one wonders what he might have built. Centuries passed, science accelerated, telescopes brought the stars closer, clocks grew more accurate. Newton described gravity, Kepler mapped planetary orbits. The mysteries of the heavens, once cloaked in bronze and myth, were now defined in calculus and lens. And yet, none of these thinkers had the Antikythera mechanism in hand. Its voice was silent still. Until 1901, when the fragments began to be studied in earnest, few could comprehend what they truly were. The idea that such a complex mechanical object came from the ancient world was too many, unthinkable, too early, too advanced, too perfect. It was Derek de Solla Price who, in the 1950s and 60s, dared to suggest otherwise. Combining scholarship and engineering, he proposed that the mechanism was an astronomical computer-on idea once dismissed, now accepted as a revelation. Later, digital imaging would confirm what Price had intuited. Not only was the mechanism real, it was more sophisticated than anyone dared believe. In a strange inversion, modern technology was required to rediscover ancient technology. Tomography revealed inner structures never before seen. Surface imaging pulled faded inscriptions into the light. Replica builders like Michael Wright and teams at University College London recreated working models, not to improve upon the mechanism, but to honor it, to understand it, to listen. And as the mechanism turned again, replicated, reconstructed, reawakened, it cast new shadows across the centuries, not shadows of ignorance, but of reverence. The Renaissance had glimpsed the sky, but the mechanism had touched it. Now, in the digital age, we finally begin to see both past and future reflected in its turning gears. This resurrection is not only scientific, it is poetic. It reminds us that knowledge can sleep, but never truly dies. That dreams may be drowned, but will rise again with the tide. That the spirit of Alexandria, of Rhodes, of lost workshops and nameless minds, still sings through metal and memory. We are no longer alone in our wonder. The past is awakened. As we leave this chapter, allow your thoughts to slow. Feel the turning of unseen gears in your own breath, the rise and fall of time like a tide within your chest. The mechanism was never really gone. It was only waiting for us to remember how to look. Not all machines are built for labor. Some are built for longing. The Antikythera mechanism was never meant to grind grain, nor to power ships, nor to lift stone blocks upon temples. It was too delicate, too intricate. It was not a slave of motion, but a reflection of it. A sacred machine designed not for utility, but for understanding. To hold the Antikythera mechanism in one's hands, even in fragment, is to hold a prayer shaped in bronze. Throughout human history, sacredness has not been reserved only for temples and scrolls. The ancients imbued certain objects with spiritual weight, a statue that could breathe the essence of a god, a scepter that carried the mandate of heaven. And in this same sacred context, the Antikythera mechanism begins to reveal another layer of itself, not merely as a marvel of engineering, but as a devotional artifact. Consider its contents. The mechanism tracks solar and lunar cycles, aligning its dials with the passage of days, months, and years. It predicts eclipses with astonishing precision. It reflects the Metonic cycle and the Saros, rhythms so ancient that even the Babylonians bowed to their cadence. These are not merely astronomical tools. They are ritual calendars. Festivals, sacrifices, and state ceremonies in the ancient Greek world were timed according to the skies. Offerings to Apollo, rites for Demeter, celebrations of Dionysus are woven into the turning of celestial spheres. To miss a date was to break faith with the divine. To know the sky was to maintain cosmic order. In this light, the Antikythera mechanism was not just a device, it was a guardian of sacred time. On one of its dials was engraved a festival calendar, complete with references to the Olympic Games and other Pan-Hellenic events. These games were more than contests. They were religious gatherings, acts of worship as much as celebration. Knowing when they occurred was to be in harmony with the divine clockwork. And what of the planetary indicators? Though incomplete, recent reconstructions suggest the mechanism may have included dials for the 5 classical planets: Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn. Each of these heavenly bodies was tied to a deity. To track them was not only an act of science, it was an act of veneration. The ancients believed the gods moved through the heavens. To watch the sky was to listen to their voices. To model their paths, to make their movements predictable, was, in a sense, to draw closer to the divine. The mechanism thus becomes a devotional tool, one that transforms observation into contemplation, and contemplation into... And the OE was not casual. It was sacred. This is why the inscriptions are so finely carved, why the gear ratios are so precise, not because they needed to be efficient, but because they needed to be true. Truth, in the ancient world, was not a matter of opinion or proof. It was a matter of alignment with nature, with the stars, with the will of the gods. In such a worldview, every turning gear of the Antikythera mechanism becomes a turning of the sacred wheel. It is a miniature cosmos, a bronze heaven, a tool not for control, but for communion. Imagine, for a moment, the setting in which it was used: a marble courtyard, the scent of olive oil and burning incense. A philosopher priest, standing before students, turns the crank of the mechanism. The gears move silently. The pointer shifts. The moon appears in a festival date aligns with a constellation. A student murmurs, "It is the year of the eclipse." They are not merely watching, they are participating. The mechanism does not command the stars. It harmonizes with them, and it invites its user to do the same. This sacred quality, this sense of time as a divine pattern, was central to ancient philosophy. Plato wrote of the world's soul moving in circles. The Pythagoreans believed that numbers governed not only mathematics, but the essence of the universe. Harmony in music, harmony in mind, harmony in stars, these were all mirrors of one eternal truth. The Antikythera mechanism, then, is not an anomaly. It is an expression of this sacred vision. Its gears do not merely turn, they sing. And even in silence beneath the sea, encrusted in coral and stone, it continued to sing. When we speak of it now, reconstructed, marvel at it. We are not reviving a dead object. We are rejoining a conversation, a ritual, a tradition, a reverent observation that stretches back into the mists of time. Even today, in an age of digital clocks and satellite timing, there remains something holy in the act of watching the sky. Something unchanged, something eternal. As we drift forward, let us carry this sense of the sacred with us. Let us listen, not with our ears, but with the stillness within. For time is not the enemy, it is the teacher, and the Antikythera mechanism, in all its quiet grandeur, remains one of its most gentle lessons. If you listen closely to the turning of ancient gears, you may hear more than motion. You may hear memory. There is something spectral about the Antikythera mechanism, not in the sense of fear or haunting, but in its ability to evoke presence of hands that once touched it, of eyes that once watched its dials move, of minds long gone that still echo in the ticking silence it left behind. It is a ghost, not of death, but of brilliance, and it remains unfinished. Like a sentence interrupted mid-thought, the mechanism's fragmented body offers only glimpses, shards of gears, halved inscriptions, dials missing their pointers. It is the ghost of a whole, a whisper of a once complete song. What we have are just 3 major fragments, known as fragments A, B, and C, along with over 80 smaller broken pieces. These are all that survived the shipwreck's violence, the sea's erosion, and the careless decades before anyone truly recognized what they had found. But through these fragments, a ghostly outline emerges. Fragment A, the largest, contains the main drive wheel and the remnants of the lunar and solar dials. Fragment B holds gearwork connected to the eclipse prediction system. Fragment C bears an enigmatic spiral, tightly wound with inscriptions so fine that only modern imaging could recover them. From these fragments, researchers have resurrected the machine in digital and physical form. They have guessed, compared, measured, and argued. Some believe the mechanism had more dials, perhaps even planetary indicators or a separate eclipse view. Others suggest it may have included a celestial globe, a moving map of the heavens. All we know for certain is that we do not know all. And it is this unknowing that gives the mechanism its ghost-like quality. It is present and yet incomplete, seen and yet obscured, known and yet always receding. But ghosts are not only made of what is missing, they are also born of connection, of emotion, of longing, of the desire to reach across the veil of time and understand. The Antikythera mechanism calls to us precisely because it is not whole, because it invites us to imagine the world that shaped it. Imagine the room where it was built, the table scattered with gears, each filed by hand, measured with calipers of bone or bronze, a workshop smelling of oil, metal, and ink. The creator, perhaps old, perhaps young, leaning over the device, whispering calculations beneath his breath, adjusting a ratio by half a tooth, seeking perfection. Now imagine the journey. The mechanism, boxed in cedar wood, wrapped in cloth, carried aboard a Roman ship. Did it lie below deck, protected in a chest of scrolls and tools? Or was it shown to passengers demonstrated with pride, its dials turned beneath torchlight as waves rocked the hull? And then, the end, a storm or perhaps a navigational error. Rocks split the hull, statues fall, amphorae roll, water pours in, cold and heavy. The box holding the mechanism breaks loose, tumbles, sinks, and with it, a world is lost. Not just bronze, but meaning. That moment echoes still, in the laboratories of Athens, where conservators brush away centuries with soft instruments, in the minds of engineers who trace the ghost paths of missing gears in hopes of reconstructing a mind they will never meet, in the dreams of artists and writers, who see in this shattered machine a symbol of what time always takes and sometimes gives back. It is no wonder that the Antikythera mechanism has entered our cultural subconscious. It has inspired poems, paintings, operas, and novels. Some see in it evidence of lost civilizations, of Atlantis, a forgotten Atlantean wisdom. Others see a miracle of coincidence that such a device survived at all, like a message in a bottle cast into the ocean of time. But perhaps the truth is more beautiful still. Perhaps the Antikythera mechanism is not a miracle, nor a mystery to be solved, but a mirror. It reflects our longing, our desire to see order in the stars, to map the infinite with gears and dials, to understand that time is not a march, but a return a spiral, like the dials of the mechanism itself. Its ghost is gentle. It does not frighten. It guides, like the faint gleam of a star no longer burning. It shines only in memory, but it still shines. And as long as we turn its gears again in thought, in replica, in reverent reconstruction, it lives. As you lie in stillness now, let the ghost of the mechanism move quietly through your thoughts. Let it turn not in fear, but in wonder. Let it remind you that even what is broken can speak, even what is lost can lead us home. Every so often something surfaces from the past that bends the spine of time. It appears not merely as an artifact but as a riddle, a contradiction, a presence out of place. The Antikythera mechanism is one such. Presents a device so advanced, so unaccountably precise, that it seems to defy the narrative of history itself. It is the machine that shouldn't exist. For centuries, the story of technological progress has followed a staircase ascending, built upon invention after invention. The ancient world, it was believed, was a world of levers and pulleys, of simple machines and mystical thinking. Complexity belonged to the modern era. Gears with precise ratios and predictive astronomical computing belonged, it was thought, to the age of industry. And then, from the sea, came a whisper of something else. A corroded lump, a forgotten device, a machine centuries ahead of its time. Its discovery fractured that staircase story like a lightning strike across stone. Because the Antikythera mechanism wasn't simply sophisticated, it was too sophisticated. Its differential gearing used to model the moon's variable speed would not reappear in surviving engineering until the Renaissance, and would not be fully understood until the era of clockwork in the 17th century. Its eclipse prediction diaspiral with encoded lunar and solar eclipses, spaced precisely within an 18-year Saros cycle, embodied a mathematical awareness, long attributed only to much later cultures. Its compactness, more than 30 gears, arranged in a tight, layered structure, of all the precision and economy of design seen only in the finest timepieces of modern horology. And yet it came from the 1st century BCE. It emerged in an age before modern bearings, before steel tools, before machining, before lenses or mechanical clocks. It arrived like a comet, bright, isolated, and with no clear origin. No other mechanisms like it had been found. No treatises describing how to build one have survived. No lineage of evolving prototypes remains. It is, in the archaeological record, an only child. This singularity gives rise to questions that shimmer like heat over sand. Was the Antikythera mechanism a one of a solitary genius's creation, unmatched in his time? Or was it merely the lone survivor of a larger tradition, now completely lost to the tides of war, decay, and neglect? Some scholars speculate that the knowledge behind the mechanism may have been more widespread than the archaeological record suggests. Perhaps similar devices existed in Rhodes, in Alexandria, in Pergamon centers of learning whose libraries were looted or burned, their scrolls turned to ash. Others propose a far more radical view that the mechanism represents a peak of forgotten science, a glimpse into a hidden chapter of human knowledge buried by time and silence. This tension, the sense that the mechanism is both miracle and orphan, is what gives it such haunting power. It forces us to confront the fragility of knowledge, that what one age achieves, another can forget, that the high towers of insight can crumble into sand with the passing of only a few generations. It also reminds us that progress is not always forward. It spirals, it returns, it is lost and found. There is a humbling in that. For all our modern wonder, our satellites, our artificial intelligence, our telescopes peering into the birth of galaxies still peer at the Antikythera mechanism through a veil of unsure exactly how it was built, who built it, or how its knowledge was lost so completely. Even today, replicas are built with difficulty. Researchers must reveal, they must divine purpose from gear. They must hear the echoes of thought in the worn teeth of bronze. And still, not everything fits. There are gears whose function remains uncertain. There are inscriptions too faded to fully read. There are slots and pivots that suggest features now missing, dials that once turned, pointers that once swept across forgotten faces. It is, even in our hands, still partially hidden, still whispering, still beyond. And perhaps that is its greatest gift, not just as a marvel of ancient craftsmanship, but as a reminder that we do not yet know all there is to know. That history is deeper than our textbooks, that genius is not bound by chronology. As you rest now, wrapped in quiet, let the thought drift through you that somewhere, in the folds of the past, minds as brilliant as any today dreamed of stars, calculated the paths of planets, and built machines that rivaled our own. Not with electricity, not with silicon, but with bronze, and patience, and wonder. The Antikythera mechanism should not exist, and yet it does. Some messages are sent in bottles, others in ink, but the most enduring are carved into silence itself. The Antikythera mechanism is not only a machine, it is a message, one spoken in the language of ratio, orbit, and turning time. One not addressed to kings or gods, but perhaps to us, the distant future, those who would one day wonder whether the ancients only gazed at stars, or if they, too, understood them. Imagine, for a moment, how it would feel to be the one crafting such a message, to sit at a wooden bench with a bronze sheet before you, to take up a tiny burin engraving tool and lean in close, your breath steady, your hand deliberate. You carve not poetry, but prediction. You mark the passage of eclipses, the cycles of months, the names of constellations, the rhythm of the heavens. You are not just recording knowledge, you are conserving time. Every letter etched into the mechanism's surfaces was a fragment of a sentence across the ages. These were not inscriptions for decoration. They were meant to be read, decoded, and used like annotations in the margins of a divine manuscript. And yet, these words, over 3,000 of them, scattered across the remaining surfaces, were nearly lost, covered by corrosion, hidden by age, obscured by the sea's long breath. But Meta remembers, and so do machines. Using advanced scanning techniques, researchers have brought these messages back into view. X-ray tomography, polynomial texture mapping, and 3D imaging have revealed the fine, nearly invisible strokes once lost to time. Now, as these ancient words re-emerge, we begin to understand not only what the mechanism did, but how it was meant to be used. Some of the inscriptions serve as user guides. They explain the turning of dials. They outline the calendars tracked by the mechanism, including the 365-day Egyptian civil calendar and the lunar-based Greek calendar. They give instructions, subtle message inviting the user into an intimate dialogue with the sky. One section details eclipse events over an 80-year Saras cycle. It lists not just the dates, but the characteristics, the direction of the shadow, the duration of darkness, even the predicted color of the moon during a total eclipse, urged shadowed pale, as if the machine could see. Other inscriptions seem more enigmatic. They reference gears no longer present, features long since lost, perhaps planetary indicators, perhaps a star map, or perhaps something we have yet to imagine. And then there is the handwriting itself, tiny, uniform, confident. The letters are consistent in angle and depth, even though they were engraved by hand. This suggests not only care, but deep familiarity. The writer had done this before, possibly many times, possibly in a place where such precision was expected. A school, a workshop, a temple, whoever this engraver was. They knew they were inscribing more than bronze. They were inscribing meaning. A kind of trust rests in those characters, a belief that someone, someday, would read them, would understand, would see not just the words, but the wisdom behind them. That someone is you. To hold a replica of the mechanism today, to see its gears spin and its dials align, is to enter into that conversation across time. To hear, faintly, the voices of those who once lived by the stars, those who, though long gone, still speak in bronze. What message, then, do they send? Is it simply astronomical? Is it mechanical? Or is there something more? Perhaps it is this, that the universe moves in patterns, that within chaos there is rhythm, that the heavens, in all their mystery, can be known, not dominated, but mirrored, that time, though it may erode stone and silence voices, cannot erase truth carved with care. The Antikythera mechanism reminds us that every age leaves behind signals. Not always in the form we expect, not always wrapped in parchment or code. Sometimes they appear as broken fragments, half buried, and yet those fragments speak. They say, "We were here." They say, "We saw the sky, and we understood." They say, "We left this for you, so let your breath slow." Let your thoughts drift like sediments settling in deep water. Listen to the quiet language of gears and glyphs, and let the message enter not through the mind, but through the silence beneath it. The rest is yours to remember. What if the universe is not chaos, but choreography? What if beneath the shifting stars and the turning seasons, there is a deeper rhythm, a silent pulse that binds everything, from the orbits of planets to the breath in your chest? The ancients believed this, not as metaphor, but as reality. And the Antikythera mechanism, with its bronze wheels and whispering dials, is one of the purest manifestations of that belief. It is not simply a machine. It is a model of the universe, not as randomness, but as a great cosmic timepiece. The idea of a clockwork universe would not be formalized until the Enlightenment, when thinkers like Newton and Leibniz envisioned the cosmos as a grand, self-regulating system designed by a divine architect and governed by immutable laws. But the seeds of that vision were planted much earlier in the workshops of ancient Greece, in the minds of philosopher mechanics, and in the very design of the Antikythera mechanism. Consider what it means to build a model of the sky. It is not a map, it is not a chart. It is a translation of movement into motion, of pattern into gear, of mystery into structure. Each wheel in the mechanism turns because it is meant to. Each tooth is placed to reflect a celestial fact. The full moon does not rise by accident. It rises because a set of gears aligns, because a ratio is honored, because the system holds. This is not domination over nature. It is participation in its logic. When you turn the mechanism's main crank, you are not just advancing dates. You are initiating a sacred echo. You are mirroring the orbits of the moon, the sun, perhaps even the wandering paths of planets. You are stepping into the mechanism of the universe itself. What a humbling thought, to see the cosmos not as something outside you, but something within your grasp, not in control, but in understanding. The Antikythera mechanism invites us into this intimacy. Its calendar dial, coiling in spirals like the double helix of time. Its eclipse predictor, revealing shadows before they fall. Its lunar display, modeling not just phases but variations in velocity. It does not need electricity, it does not need programming. It needs only motion and silence. This, perhaps, is its greatest gift, a reminder that complexity does not always require noise, that elegance is often quiet, that the deepest truths are not shouted but turned slowly, patiently by gears too small to be seen at a glance. The clockwork universe is not rigid, it is rhythm. To the Greeks, chronos was not merely time, but the ordering of things. Antikythera, its partner word, was sacred time, the opportune moment. The mechanism carries both. It tracks chronos in its precise intervals, and it holds kairos in its alignment of celestial and ritual cycles. This is why it feels alive, not in a biological sense but in the way it listens, the way it remembers. The mechanism does not predict the future in the way we use calendars. It does not schedule appointments. It reveals relationships between sun and moon, between eclipse and ritual, between motion and meaning. It is less like a machine, and more like a meditation, a prayer made tangible, a mandala of bronze, and like all sacred models, it reflects its makers. The hands that cut its gears believed in harmony. The mind that composed its ratios believed in unity. The scribe who carved its words believed it mattered, because to them, the universe was not just a place, it was a song of light, motion, and return. The Antikythera mechanism does not sing aloud, but it hums, softly, through time. And now, in this quiet hour, you can feel that hum. You can feel the slow turning of thoughts older than history, the slow alignment of breath and sky. Close your eyes, if they are not already closed. Imagine the machine, whole and shining in its original box, its dials unbroken, its gears smooth and golden. Someone turns it. Slowly, the stars move, and somewhere deep inside you something turns too. In every great machine, there is space between the moving parts. Without it, nothing could turn, nothing could breathe. The Antikythera mechanism, as intricate and precise as it is built upon such space, not just physical, the gaps between gears, the pauses in rotation, but also philosophical. It lives in the silence between revolutions, in the stillness between events, in the invisible rhythm that links moon to sun, year to eclipse, thought to motion. And in this, it mirrors the sky itself. Because when we look to the heavens, we do not see only light, we see silence. The silence between stars is not empty. It is full of waiting. It is the dark canvas on which the planets paint their paths. It is the breath held before the moon emerges. It is the stillness that makes the motion visible. The ancients knew this. They did not rush to fill the silence. They listened to it. They watched the stars, not as distractions, but as messages. They waited for the return of constellations with patience. They charted the phases of the moon not for curiosity alone, but for connection. The Antikythera mechanism reflects this quiet observation. It is not designed for speed. It is designed for rhythm, for turning slowly, for aligning with events that take years, even decades, to repeat. When one turns its crank, the dials respond with grace. There is no ticking, only the smooth unfolding of celestial relationships, months aligning with eclipses, festivals circling back like swallows in spring. It is a device that teaches waiting, and this, too, is sacred. In modern life, time moves with urgency. We chase minutes, watch clocks, count notifications, but the mechanism asks us to slow, to remember that there is a deeper time, one that moves beneath the surface of days, of lunar shadows and solar whispers, the time that lives in silence. When archaeologists recover the fragments of the Antikythera mechanism, they did not at first recognize what they held. It looked like nothing else. It did not shout its purpose. It waited to be understood. And even now, after decades of study, it still holds its silence. There are gears whose functions remain speculative, inscriptions whose letters are worn into dust, dial segments that seem to imply features we no longer possess. The mechanism remains, in part, a mystery, and perhaps that is as it should be, because silence is not a failure. It is a space of reverence, of humility, of potential. The Antikythera mechanism speaks, yes, but it also listens. It listens to time, to motion, to the mind of the one who dares to turn it. It says, here is the universe, not explained, but embodied. Here is the sky, not in numbers, but in motion. Here is silence, not empty, but full. As you drift now, resting in your own silence, feel the mechanism's stillness within you, the way your breath turns like a gear, the way your thoughts spiral like dials, the way your presence aligns, for a moment, with the stars. You are not separate from them. You are part of the same turning. The silence between the stars is not beyond you. It is in you. And in that silence, the mechanism waits not to be solved, but to be felt. Every machine has a maker, but not every maker has a name that survives the turning of time. The Antikythera mechanism is a marvel, but behind its bronze and brilliance were eyes that watched the sky, hands that traced shadows, minds that whispered to the stars, and most of those minds have been forgotten. There were not kings, not generals, not poets whose verses were carved in stone. They were the ones who rose before dawn, year after year, to watch the moon slip behind hills. The ones who scratched patterns into clay tablets and papyrus scrolls. The ones who noticed when the sun set slightly farther north on the horizon than it did the day before. They were careful, patient, quiet, and it is because of them that the Antikythera mechanism exists. Its gears are not only technology, they hold the legacy of Babylonian astronomers who marked lunar eclipses on star-shaped tablets, of Egyptian priests who watched Sirius rise and knew the Nile would soon flood, of Greek philosophers who mapped the sky with geometry and dared to believe the universe was knowable. This machine was not the work of one mind, but the culmination of many generations whose names have vanished, but whose work endures. And what kind of life did they live? Not one of fame or reward. They lived by celestial light, by habit, by ritual, by the slow training of the eye. They may have lived on roads, in the company of him, or studied in Alexandria, where scrolls curled on wooden shelves and calculations were passed from hand to hand, or walked along the Aegean coast, pausing each evening to trace Venus's position with nothing but eye and instinct. Some may have been slaves, others scribes. A few, perhaps, were women unrecorded, yet no less observant, no less gifted. Their work would have been tedious by today's standards, watching, recording, comparing, waiting, and yet, through their efforts, patterns emerged. The moon's cycle became a calendar. The sun's path became a compass. The stars became a clock. And from these patterns, someone, perhaps many someones, dreamed of building a device that could reflect it all. To see the sky, to turn a wheel and know where the moon would be 3 years hence. To align a dial and predict an eclipse a generation away. To hold in hand what once lived only in the sky. It is breathtaking, and it is humbling, because the Antikythera mechanism did not arise from nothing. It is the fruit of devotion, the final link in a chain forged not by genius alone, but by those who gave their lives to watching, listening, and remembering. And yet, they are gone, their names lost, their notebooks dust, their graves unmarked. But their thoughts remain in bronze, in ratios, in spirals. They speak through the way the gears turn, through the way the dials align with lunar cycles, still true today. They speak through the silence between the fragments, in the unfinished inscriptions, in the missing teeth that still suggest what once was. The forgotten sky watchers did not leave statues, they left truth, and that is a higher legacy. So as you lie in stillness now, beneath your own sky, perhaps behind closed eyes, perhaps with stars faint above your roof, take a moment to feel them near, not as ghosts, but as echoes, as presences, the ones who watched, the ones who waited, the ones who trusted that someone, someday, would remember to listen. You are that someone. You are part of their dream now. And as you rest, they rest with you under the same sky, in the same time, still watching, still waiting, still turning. Some knowledge is lost in fire, some is buried in sand, but some is lost to the sea. The Antikythera mechanism, in all its impossible beauty, was not sealed in a temple or hidden in a vault. It was not destroyed by war or consumed by flame. It was sunk, swallowed by the Aegean, tucked into darkness, wrapped in centuries of silence. It was, quite literally, shipwrecked knowledge. We often speak of shipwrecks as tragedies of cargo lost, of lives perished, of dreams cut short. But in this case, the shipwreck preserved what might have been destroyed by fire or reused for scrap, instead settled on the ocean floor, covered in sediment and coral, protected by distance and depth. And what a cargo it carried! The ship itself, likely dating from the 1st century BCE, was no humble fishing vessel. It was large, built for long-distance travel and bearing a load fit for a noble or a scholar. Recovered alongside the mechanism were bronze and marble statues, luxurious glassware, coins from Asia Minor, an amphorae once filled with fine wine or oil. But the true treasure was the one no one recognized, at least not at first: a lump of corroded bronze, fused, fractured, and forgotten. And yet, that single object held more meaning than all the others combined. When the divers first saw the wreck in 1900, they could not have known what they had found. The sea had cloaked the mechanism in mystery. It was not until months later, when fragments were brought to the National Archaeological Museum in Athens, that its gear so strange, so out of place, began to reveal themselves. And even then, few understood. It took nearly half a century for anyone to truly begin asking the right questions. Another half-century before technology could answer them. And still, we are learning. The wreck that preserved the Antikythera mechanism reminds us that knowledge is vulnerable, that it can be hidden, not by intention, but by accident, that entire worlds of thought can vanish in a single storm. How many other mechanisms were lost this way? How many other ships sailing between Alexandria and Rome, between Pergamon and Corinth, carried devices, scrolls, instruments, teachings, now resting beneath silt and shell? How many treasures of the mind lie in places no archaeologist has yet touched? We tend to think of knowledge as cumulative, an ever-growing pyramid of insight. But the Antikythera mechanism humbles us. It shows that knowledge is fragile, that it can disappear, that the apex of understanding in one age can become an enigma in the next. Shipwrecked knowledge is not only ancient, it happens still. Ideas lost to indifference, manuscripts libraries unvisited, wisdom set adrift by war, by distraction, by the passing of generations. But sometimes, miraculously, a fragment floats back, and when it does, it calls to us. The Antikythera mechanism is such a fragment, a shard of deep time, a letter from a civilization we thought we fully understood, revealing, gently, that we did not. And it survived, not because we preserved it, but because we forgot it, left it alone long enough for the sea to protect what we might have destroyed. The shipwreck that carried it is still being explored. In recent years, divers have returned, using robotic arms, 3D sonar, and gentle excavation tools. More bronze fragments have surfaced, perhaps more clues, perhaps other devices. But even if nothing else is found, the message remains. Knowledge can be shipwrecked, but it can also be recovered. And when it returns, it changes us, not because it is new, but because it is ancient. Because it reminds us that the past was never simple, that the sea does not forget, that what is lost is not always gone. As you sink now into the quiet waters of sleep, let yourself drift gently in that space between forgetting and remembering. Let the image of the sunken ship settle in your mind, its broken beams, its scattered cargo, the sleeping mechanism within. And let the knowledge it carried rise again in you, not as noise, but as a wave of stillness, a wave of wonder. Machines do not dream, but they do remember. They remember in the way they are shaped, in the way their gears interlock, in the way their parts move in silent harmony. They carry memory not as thought, but as form, not in ink, but in teeth and ratio. The Antikythera mechanism is such a memory forged in bronze. It does not speak, yet it tells a story. It does not think, yet it contains thought. It is not alive, yet it remembers the shape of time, the curve of the moon's path, the cycle of eclipses, the sacred rhythm of ancient calendars. But most of all, it remembers us. It remembers a time when humanity looked up and sought understanding, not in dominance, but in reflection. When to observe the heavens was to participate in them. When time was a circle, not a line. This is the memory the Antikythera mechanism preserves. It is not just a machine, it is evidence of a worldview, a way of being in the world where knowledge was not separated from wonder, where science was not distinct from spirit, where engineering was an act of reverence. And this memory, though corroded and fractured, endures. In its gears we see the memory of Babylonians, in its ratios, the legacy of Greek math, in its design, the touch of artisans who understood both form and function, and through its silence, the presence of all who came before, those who watched, who measured, who turned bronze into wisdom. Modern machines store information in code. The Antikythera mechanism stored it in movement. Turn one dial, and the others respond. Adjust the calendar, and the moon changes phase. rotate the year and eclipses come into alignment. It is a physical memory, a choreography of interdependence. Every part knows what the others are doing. Every tooth of every gear remembers what came before. And even broken, even incomplete, it continues to remember. That is perhaps the most beautiful thing about it. We cannot reconstruct it perfectly. And yet, it remembers more than we do. It remembers a world we lost. A world in which time was not just a number, but a presence. In which machines were not tools, but mirrors. In which knowledge did not isolate us from nature but drew us closer to it. The Antikythera mechanism holds that world. In its memory, the moon still turns. The sun still moves through the zodiac. The eclipses still return. The festivals still circle back. And the stars still whisper. It is not just the oldest known computer, it is the oldest conversation. And now, you are part of it. As you rest, feel its memory settle into you, not as data, not as history, but as quiet recognition. You have known this rhythm before. In the beating of your heart, in the waxing and waning of your thoughts, in the tides of sleep and wake, you, too, are a machine of memory. And as you drift now into deeper silence, the mechanism turns once more inside you. Its gears hum, its wisdom unfolds, and the memory of those who built it lives again. The Antikythera mechanism is ancient, but it is not alone. Its spirit lingers in quiet places. In watchmaking, in the tick of precision gears, in astronomical observatories where hands still trace the arc of planets across glass domes, in minds that marvel, not at what machines can do, but what they mean. We live in a world built by machines, digital ones, fast, silent, unseen. Our devices think in binary. They blink and calculate. They are distant cousins to the Antikythera mechanism, more powerful by orders of magnitude, but often less poetic, less intimate, less connected to the sky. And yet, echoes remain. In modern planetariums, as domes project the sky in sweeping arcs, we are recreating what the mechanism once did with bronze and breath. In mechanical watches, whose turbulence spin in nested rotations, we see the same fascination with harmony and movement. In the slow turning of an Ori, modeling the solar system with delicate arms, we feel the pulse of that same ancient desire to hold time, to understand its shape, to see the cosmos in motion. These are not technological necessities. They are acts of wonder. And that wonder echoes from the Antikythera mechanism into our present moment. Even in digital code, we trace orbits. Even in silicon circuits, we simulate the heavens. We may no longer craft bronze ears by hand, but we still write FM. We still wait for solstices and equinoxes with reverence. And perhaps, most surprisingly, the Antikythera mechanism itself has influenced us. Since its rediscovery, engineers, historians, and artisans around the world have sought to rebuild it, not just to study it, but to feel it, to reawaken the touch of bronze, the precision of ancient design, the logic embedded in gear and wheel. In laboratories and workshops, replicas turn once more. Some are simple wood and brass, with etched dials and hand-filed teeth. Others are elaborate, made with 3D printers, laser scans, and custom alloys. Each one is an echo, not of the exact original, but of its spirit. That spirit has reached into classrooms, into museums, into the dreams of those who once thought the ancient world was primitive. It has shifted the narrative from linear progress to lost brilliance, from modern superiority to ancestral intimacy. And in that shift, something quiet but profound has occurred. We have begun to listen to the past differently, not as something behind us, but as something beneath us, like bedrock, like foundation, like whispering roots. The Antikythera mechanism is not merely a relic. It is a reminder that knowledge can be elegant, that motion can be sacred, that time can be felt, not just measured. Even now, in our glowing screens and ticking apps, the need to feel time's texture has not left us. Why else do we turn our glasses? Why else do we light candles for reflection? Why else do we still look up at the stars? Because something in us still remembers. Something deep, something old, something bronze. As you rest tonight, surrounded by the quiet hum of modern time, allow the echo of the mechanism to reach you. Not in sound, but in rhythm, in the way your breath deepens, in the way your thoughts slow, in the way your body turns toward stillness like a planet to its star. Let the mechanism remind you that technology can be contemplative, that machines can hold meaning, that time, even now, is not just passing, it is returning. Long after we are gone, the stars will still rise. They will wheel across the sky with the same grace, the same rhythm, the same silent certainty that stirred the ancients to carve calendars, mark solstices, and build machines like the Antikythera mechanism. The sky forgets nothing. It carries memory not in words, but in motion. And so, perhaps, it is not we who remember the stars. Perhaps it is the stars who remember us. They remember the first human who noticed the moon's shape thinning. They remember the builders of Stonehenge, who set stones to catch the solstice light. They remember the priest in Babylon who scratched eclipse dates into clay. They remember the philosopher in Rhodes, sketching gears to mirror orbits. They remember the sailor who loaded the mechanism onto the ship that would never reach shore. Each of them, gone. but their memory lives on in the star's return. And in one other place, quiet and small, a corroded device, recovered from the floor of the sea, still, unmoving, yet filled with motion. The Antikythera mechanism is not merely a model of the cosmos, it is a gesture of remembrance, an act of faith in the continuity of time, in the knowability of the universe, in the connection between above and below. And in this way, it mirrors you. For even as you lie here, adrift between wakefulness and sleep, your breath continues its pattern, your heart beats its celestial rhythm, your thoughts move in spirals, rising, fading, returning. You are not separate from the sky, you are one of its movements, one of its quiet, temporary constellations. And just as the mechanism reflects the motion of stars and moons, you reflect something deeper too, the human desire to find meaning in that motion, to trace the invisible, to turn chaos into pattern, to remember. Even in the dark, you remember. Even in silence, you hear. Even in stillness, you turn. The stars remember, the machine remembers, and so do you. Perhaps this is the true legacy of the Antikythera mechanism, not as an object, but as a mirror that shows us the part of ourselves that still listens, still watches, still waits for the sky to return. As your breath slows now to match that rhythm, feel the stars above you, not distant, but near, not burning, but watching, not fading, but remembering, and let yourself be remembered by the sky, by time, by the mechanism that once sang their names. Some machines are built to compute, others to create, but this one was built to dream. The Antikythera mechanism, silent for 2,000 years, never ticked like a clock, never spoke like a prophet, never moved on its own, and yet, within its compact frame, the ancients placed their greatest dream, to understand the cosmos to capture eternity in bronze, to trace time with the turning of a wheel. It is, even now, dreaming of hands that once turned its crank beneath firelight, of fingers that traced dials as the sun rose behind marble columns, of voices that whispered predictions, not with certainty, but with awe. The Antikythera mechanism is not an object to be solved, it is a presence to be felt. It exists in the same space as myths and lullabies, as temple bells and tide rhythms. It speaks to a part of us that is older than language and younger than fear, a part that still believes the universe is alive, that the stars speak, that time can be seen, that mystery is not a problem, but a companion. This is what the mechanism teaches, not just what the ancients knew, but what they believed. That knowledge and wonder are not opposites, that measurement and reverence can share the same dial, that the path of a planet and the passage of a soul might not be so different, and now, here in your stillness, you too are turning. Your thoughts, like gears, unwind and slow. Your breath, like lunar phases, waxes and wanes. Your awareness moves in orbits not linear but looping. You are not watching the mechanism. You are the mechanism, a dreaming one. Inside you, ancient cycles return of memory, of sleep, of quiet. The Antikythera mechanism, so long buried, so nearly forgotten, is alive again, not because we rebuilt it, but because we listened, because in its silence, we heard ourselves, and in its turning, we remembered how to be still. So rest now, dreamer. Let the bronze dials rotate softly in the background of your thoughts. Let eclipses pass unseen. Let constellations realign. Let time become gentle again. You are not alone. You lie within the dreaming mechanism, and it lies within you, turning, watching, remembering. As our journey through the Antikythera mechanism draws to a close, let these ancient whispers settle into your consciousness like morning mist over forgotten ruins. The mysteries we have explored tonight are but fragments of the vast tapestry of human experience, threads that connect us to those who walked before us in ages long past. If tonight's journey has brought you peace, consider becoming a regular traveler on these mystical paths. Subscribe to The Dreaming Historian to join our community of seekers, and let the gentle chime of new stories guide you into restful contemplation. Share your thoughts about tonight's exploration. Tell us how these ancient voices spoke to your spirit, and let us know from where in the world you joined us on this timeless voyage. Until we meet again in the realm of dreams and whispers, may your rest be filled with the peaceful echoes of history's gentle mysteries. Sleep well, dreamer, and let the mechanism turn forever.